Okay, I am pounding into the night. It is January 17th, 1:35 a.m., so please forgive me if I speak slowly, but I will try. We are back in Mesillat Yesharim, Path of the Just, Chapter 13, The Virtue of Abstinence, Perishut. So, this should be pretty short, but here we go. Abstinence is the first step toward piety. And here I want to point out that whatever we have explained until now referred to what a person had to do in order to become righteous, right? From here onward, the subject is how one can become pious, right? Therefore, abstinence is to piety what vigilance is to alacrity. The first member of each pair involves renouncing evil, while the second involves doing good. So our sages of blessed memory expressed the underlying principle of abstinence in Yevamot 20a as follows: sanctify yourself through the permissible. This is what the word abstinence actually means: to abstain and to distance oneself from something, to deny oneself what is permissible with the aim of setting up a barrier. And this is what a lot of the rabbinic enactments are all about. It's setting up a barrier. It's putting up a protection so that you don't violate a biblical prohibition, or in a sense maybe to augment your practice or to help elevate you in a certain way, but continuing, preventing any contact with the actual prohibition. So setting up a boundary, preventing any contact from the actual prohibition. The idea is that one must distance himself and abstain from anything whose emergence may lead to evil, even though in the immediate present it does not lead to evil, and even though it is surely not a matter of intrinsic evil. So, just like Perishut says, Ben Azai says, one mitzvah leads to another mitzvah, one sin leads to another sin. So he actually says a minor mitzvah leads to another mitzvah. So it's like cumulative snowball effect. Whatever direction you choose in life, to follow a mitzvah or to follow an avera, that's what's going to happen, right? One who inquires into the matter will discover three distinct levels: the actual prohibitions, their restrictions, fences around the Torah, which are enactments and safeguards that our sages of blessed memory decreed for all of Israel, and the individual restrictions that every person who is committed to abstinence must observe, by setting up his own boundaries and building fences for himself. This means that one must forego those very things that are permissible that have not been prohibited to all Israel, and he must abstain from them so that he will be very, very far from evil. Right? You might question the legitimacy of allowing additional prohibitions to be introduced, and you could argue as follows: for our sages of blessed memory have said in Yerushalmi Nedarim 9:1, is it not enough that the Torah prohibits that you restrict yourself with other prohibitions? Haven't our sages of blessed memory already decreed what they say fit in their wisdom to prohibit and safeguard? And when they regarded something as permissible, it was because they regarded it as belonging to the sphere of the permissible and not the forbidden. Why then must we create new decrees that they saw no need to enact? Furthermore, there is no limit to this, and the result will be that a person will become empty and depressed and deprived of all enjoyment in this world. And our sages of blessed memory have said, Yerushalmi Kedushim 4:12, that in the future one will have to answer for his actions before the divine presence regarding everything that his eyes beheld, from which he refused to partake, although he was allowed to do so and was able to do so. In support of this, the sages cited a verse from Scripture, Kohelet, that's Ecclesiastes 2:10, whatever my eyes requested, I did not withhold from them. The answer to this is that abstinence is both necessary and vital. Our sages cautioned us about this and commented in Sefaria, Kedushim 1:1, you shall be holy. So from a verse from Vayikra 19:2 means you shall separate yourselves. They further said in Ta'anit 11a, whoever fasts voluntarily is referred to as holy. This is deduced from a case of a Nazir. Furthermore, they said in Pesikta Darav Kahana 6, the righteous person eats for the contentment of his soul. Mishle, Proverbs 13:25. This refers to Hezekiah, king of Yehuda, on whose table was served no more than 2 literin of vegetables. They also said about Rabbeinu HaKadosh, it's Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Ketubot 104a, that when he was dying, he held up his 10 fingers and said, it is well known to you, O Eternal, that I have never deprived derived any pleasure from this world, not even with my little finger. And they said, Tana Develiyahu Rabbah 26 and Yalkut Shimoni 830. Before one prays that words of Torah be absorbed in his innards, let him pray that food and drink not be absorbed there. All of these statements explicitly teach us the need for abstinence in its compulsory nature. Though of course we must still explain those statements that teach the opposite. The explanation is as follows. There are obviously many fundamental distinctions involved. There is a type of abstinence that we have been commanded about, and there is a type of undesirable abstinence about which we have been forewarned to avoid. This is what Shlomo HaMelech, may peace be upon him, said in Kohelet, that's Ecclesiastes 7:16, do not be overly righteous. We will now define the type of abstinence. Well, that actually reminds me, it's like they said that you don't follow the stringencies of both Hillel and Shammai, or the leniencies of both Hillel and Shammai. You either follow Hillel or you follow Shammai. So being overly pious, that reminds me of the idea of following the stringencies of both of them. Okay. We will now define the type of abstinence that is good, having clarified for ourselves that everything that goes on in this world is designed to test man, as we have written and proven above, and having also discerned man's great weakness as well as his attraction to those things that are harmful, it becomes compellingly clear that one should flee from these contingencies as best as he can in order to protect himself from the evil that follows in their footsteps. For there is no worldly pleasure that, in its wake, does not attract some form of sinning. For example, food and drink, when free of all dietary prohibitions, are permitted. However, filling the stomach leads one to rebelliousness against Hashem, and the drinking of wine leads to idolatry and other such evils. Even more at risk is a person who has accustomed himself to be satiated through eating and drinking. If he just once lacks what he is used to, he will suffer and will be keenly aware of his deprivation. Consequently, he would throw himself into the harsh pursuit of business and the struggle for possessions, so that his table will be arranged the way he desires. From here he will be drawn to iniquity and theft, and from there toward the taking of oaths, and toward the other sins that follow. He will furthermore remove himself from the service of the eternal, from Torah and from prayer. He would have been spared all of this if only he hadn't allowed himself to be drawn toward these pleasures at the outset. In a similar vein, our sages said in reference to a wayward and rebellious son, Sanhedrin 72a, the Torah understood where his thoughts were leading to. And similarly, in reference to adultery, they said in Sota 2a, anyone who sees a disgraced Sota, which is an adulteress, should abstain from drinking wine. Take this to heart. This is an excellent method for rescuing oneself from one's evil inclination. Once a person is about to sin, it will be difficult for him to vanquish and conquer the evil inclination. It is therefore necessary that, while he is still far from sinning, he continue to keep his distance from sins. Then the evil inclination will find it difficult to bring him closer to sinning. For example, cohabitation with one's wife is totally permissible, yet ablutions were decreed for those who had seminal emissions, so that Torah scholars would not seek the company of their wives the way roosters do. Perishut 22a. Although the actual act is permissible, it serves to stamp a person's being with lustful desire, and from there one is likely to be drawn to the forbidden. As stated by our rabbis of blessed memory in Sanhedrin 107a, there is a small organ in man. When he satiates it, it hungers. When he starves it, it becomes satisfied. They said about Rabbi Eliezer that even at night time, in the proper moment, Nedarim 20b, he would expose a handbreadth and conceal 2 handbreadths. And it seemed as though he was compelled by a demon to deny himself pleasure even in the moment of pleasure. Regarding clothing and adornments, the Torah made no prohibitions regarding their beauty or style. It did, however, prescribe that they should not contain kilayim, mixed fibers of wool and linen, and it laid down the need for tzitzit, and then they are all permissible. But who is not aware that wearing fancy or embroidered garments leads to arrogance and brings one closer to idolatry as well? And we may add envy, lust, and extortion that develop through man's pursuit of all that he regards as precious. Our sages of blessed memory have told us in Perishut Rabbah 22:6, when the evil inclination sees a person adjusting his heel, tidying his garments, or grooming his hair, it says, "This one is mine." strolling and talking, as long as they do not involve something forbidden, are certainly permissible according to the letter of the law. Yet how much neglect of Torah they generate, how much slander, how much lying, how much flippancy. And it states in Mishle, that's Proverbs 10:19, one who overindulges in speech cannot avoid sinning. In summation, since all of one's dealings in this world are extremely dangerous, how can we not extol one who wishes to flee and distance himself greatly from them? This is what is involved when referring to the beneficial type of abstinence. One must not benefit from anything in this world other than what is essential to one's individual nature. It was for this that Rebbe, that's Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, extolled himself in the previously mentioned passage that he never derived any pleasure from this world, not even with his little finger. Despite the fact that he was the Nasi of Israel, and his table befitted a king, as dictated by the honor due to a Nasi, as they of blessed memory have said in AvaTorah 11a, there are two nations in your womb. Perishut 25:23, that's Genesis 25:23, refers to Rebbe and Antonius, whose tables were never lacking neither lettuce nor pumpkin nor radish, neither during the dry season nor during the rainy season. And Hizkiyahu, king of Yehuda, similarly only benefited from what is essential. The other passages that I've mentioned confirm and demonstrate that a person has the need to abstain from all worldly pleasures so as not to endanger himself. You may of course ask, if this in fact is something both necessary and vital, why didn't the sages enact legislation for this the way they did for the other rabbinic enactments? The answer is clear and simple. The sages only enacted decrees, Baba Kama 79b, that the majority of people could abide by, and the majority of people cannot obtain piousness. It is enough of an achievement for them to be righteous. However, those similar individuals among the nation whose desires to attain the closeness of the Blessed One, and to bring through their merits spiritual benefits to the remaining masses who are dependent upon them, they are the ones who should fulfill the tenets of the pious that others are incapable of. Id est, that is, the provisions of abstinence mentioned herein. This is the Eternal's express choice, for it is impossible for the entire nation to be equally on one footing, since there are varying levels among them, each person in accord with his intelligence. But at least there are select individuals who can develop their capacities thoroughly, and through those who are capable, those who are not will also attain the Eternal's love and his divine presence, similar to what they of blessed memory taught in the Midrash when referring to the four species of the Lulav, Vayikra Rabbah 30. Let these come and atone for those. And we know what Eliyahu of blessed memory said to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi after the incident involving Ula bar Koshev in Yerushalmi Teramot 8:10, when Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi responded, "Isn't it a Mishnah?" And Eliyahu replied, "Is it Mishnah's Hasidim, the tenets of the pious?" Harmful abstinence, however, resembles the ways of the foolish Gentiles who do not only refrain from what is unessential, but also deny themselves what is essential and chastise themselves often in strange ways, which the Eternal totally rejects. The sages have said in Ta'anit 22b, a person is not allowed to mortify himself, and when referring to charity, they said in Yerushalmi Peah 8:9, whoever needs to take and doesn't is regarded as if he has shed blood. And they also said, Ta'anit 22b, into a living being. Bereshit 2:7, Genesis 2:7, means that it is our duty to sustain the soul that I implanted within you. In Ta'anit 11a, whoever fasts regularly is called a sinner. And our sages established that this relates to one who is not able to withstand self-affliction. Furthermore, Hillel used to say, one who is beneficent to his own soul is a pious person. Mishle, that's Proverbs 11:17, refers to the eating of breakfast. And Hillel would wash his face and hands in honor of his heavenly master, deriving this a fortiori from the practice that prevailed at the time of washing the statues that represented kings. Vayikra Rabbah 34:3. The fundamental rule to be derived from this is as follows. A person should abstain from any worldly matters that are unessential. On the other hand, anything that he regards as essential, for whatever reason, must not be abstained from because it is essential to him. But if he disregards this principle and abstains from it, he is a sinner. This is a sound rule, yet the application of the specifics in conforming to this rule is left to one's discretion, and a person will be extolled in accordance with the degree of his intelligence. Mishle, that's Proverbs 12:8. It is impossible to assemble all the specifics, since they are so numerous, and man's mind cannot encompass all of them. Rather, one must deal with them one by one, each at its appropriate time. So, the statement, a person should abstain from any worldly matters that are unessential. So, when I was in my 20s, I had this idea, this statement that I kind of governed what I would do with my money. And if I considered buying something, I asked myself the question, can I live without this? Or how, I've lived, let's say 20 some years without this. I can live the rest of my life without it. So, a person should abstain from any worldly matters that are unessential. That's what it reminds me of. But it also reminds me of other stuff like crazy entertainment, video games, all that kind of stuff. It's water under the bridge. It's not going to make a difference. So, something to be abstaining from probably is a good idea. Parak Yod Dalet. The elements of Perishut, abstinence. Oh, and I should point out that I believe that this is the root of the word. Pei Resh Shin is where the root of the term for Pharisees comes from, because they were kind of like separatist. That's kind of one way that people translated that. And for anybody out there that's watching it, that their idea of this came from Christianity. The rabbis are not the Pharisees. The Pharisees were kind of made fun of in the Talmud because they did things they're like the ones that go too far, right? So he was just talking about there's a bad type of abstinence where you go too far, and the Pharisees were in that category. So anybody that has that Christian background, who the rabbis of the Talmud are, mainly the ones that we read, because there are a few exceptions to this, they are probably what was described as the scribes. I think still in Christianity, that's probably like they don't like us. But anyway, the elements of abstinence. Abstinence consists of three major elements: abstinence from pleasures, abstinence in halakhic matters, and abstinence in social conduct. Abstinence from pleasures consists of what we've mentioned in the previous chapter. This means that one should not take anything from the sphere of worldly matters other than what is essential for him. And it includes anything that is pleasurable to the senses, such as food, intimate marital relations, clothing, strolling, auditory sensations, and the like. Which, he's not writing in our time, but I guess that's like, music. Yeah, everybody's got their headphones in, listening to music. But sometimes some people, you see them with their headphones in, they have lectures, so you can't just associate headphones with that. So anything that is pleasurable to the senses, such as food, intimate relations, clothing, strolling, auditory sensations, and the like, though excluding pleasure enjoyed on those days when enjoyment is a mitzvah. But that doesn't necessarily mean that music is a bad thing. The prophets used music as a way to, it was their method to approach God and communicate with God, or to receive some sort of revelation. So it's not a bad thing, but there's a lot of music that is a bad thing. Abstinence in halakhic matters consists of being continually stringent. One should consider even a minority viewpoint in a dispute if it seems justified, even when the halakha has not been decided in accordance with this viewpoint, provided that this stringency does not lead to any leniency. And one should be stringent when in doubt, even where one could be lenient. Our sages of blessed memory have already explained in Hulin 37b the statement of Yehezkel, That's Ezekiel. My soul has not been defiled. Ezekiel 4:14. Means I have not eaten from any animal that required a rabbinic decision, and I have not eaten from the meat of an animal that had to be slaughtered quickly. All of this is definitely permitted by law, yet nonetheless he decided to be stringent with himself. So, eat animal that required a rabbinic decision. So, like, if after it's slaughtered, and like they're searching the organs for some sort of disease that would disqualify it. So that would be a case like that. So, it could be a perfectly fine animal that there's no question, but there might be something, there's a question, you bring somebody in. So even though that rabbi might say, yes, ultimately this is kosher, it wasn't, inappropriate disease or malformity or something like that, is permitted. He's saying that this element of abstinence is to not to eat that meat. Okay, I've already indicated previously that those who practice abstinence must not allow themselves to be guided by what is permissible for the whole of Israel. They must distance themselves from what is repugnant and from whatever is similar to it and from whatever is similar to that. Similar to it and from whatever is similar to that. Okay, so as Mar Ukva said in Hulin 105a, in this matter, my relationship to my father is like vinegar that derives from wine. If my father had eaten meat today, he would not eat cheese until the next day at the same time. Yet when I eat meat in this meal, I will refrain from eating cheese only until the next meal. Now certainly his father's conduct was not governed by any halakhic ruling, for otherwise Mar Ukva would surely not have contravened it. Rather, his father was stringent in a way he practiced abstinence. This is the reason why Mar Ukva referred to himself as vinegar that derives from wine, since his abstinence was weaker than his father's. Abstinence in social conduct consists of solitude and separation from society to free one's heart for the service of the eternal and for proper contemplation regarding it. But this is conditional on his not leaning here as well toward the other extreme. For our sages of blessed memory have already stated in Ketubot 17a, a person's demeanor should always be oriented toward people. And they said in Perishut 63b, a sword upon those who fabricate, habadim, they will be stupefied. Yirmiyahu 50:36. So Jeremiah 50:36 is referring to a sword upon the enemies of Torah scholars, a euphemism for the Torah scholars themselves who sit in isolation, bavad, while learning Torah. Rather, one should join the company of good people for as long as may be necessary for his Torah study for earning a livelihood, and afterwards he should seclude himself in order to cleave to his God and to attain the ways of righteousness in the true service of the eternal. This includes limiting one's speech. And I'll say this, so in the little playlist that we have that's kind of related to Tikkun Hatzot, I'm reading through, I read a couple Mishnayot in Tamid, and also we're going to be reading through the Gemara for Tamid. That might take a lot more time, but the one thing to keep in mind if you want to follow that is consider how many words those priests actually say. They tend to say the minimum of words. So like in the sanctuary, it wasn't in the tabernacle area. Tabernacle. In the temple area, the priest would use a minimum of language that even like ordinary speech just wouldn't have happened. It wasn't like a job where like you're talking to your buddy and like, hey, how was dinner last night, all that, just ordinary conversation. It wouldn't have happened. The priests they seem to have had a minimum of words that they use. Like, the one thing that comes to mind is one of the things they said to the one guy was like, it's time. Like, normally you would be like, okay, it's time for what? But they knew what it was time for, and a minimum of words was used because that area of holiness is not a place for like your ordinary speech. So this includes limiting one's speech, refraining from idle conversation, not gazing beyond one's 4 cubits, and all other such things which relate to matters that have become habitual to a person until they become second nature. Although I've set out the rules of 3 aforementioned elements in concise terms, you can see how they encompass many human actions that I have already indicated to you, that the specifics must be dealt with by one's judgment so as to keep them in line with the appropriate and truthful standard of abstinence. So I have a prayer here. It's not in the Siddur, but I have it on a card. It's that was, I believe, was composed by the Chaim. So regarding, limiting one's speech, I'll read this, and you'll kind of get an understanding of what I'm talking about. So, Master of the universe, may it be your will, compassionate, gracious God, that you grant me the merit today and every day to guard my mouth and tongue from speaking lashon hara and rechilot, and may I be zealous not to speak ill even of an individual, and certainly not of the entire Jewish people or a portion of it, and even more so, may I be zealous not to complain about the ways of the Holy One, blessed be He. May I be zealous not to may I be zealous not to speak words of falsehood, flattery, strife, anger, arrogance, hurt, embarrassment, mockery, and all other forbidden forms of speech. Grant me the merit to speak only that which is necessary for my physical and spiritual well-being, and may all of my deeds and words be for the sake of heaven. So, speech is very difficult because that's what we use to communicate with each other, and we live at a kind of a low level compared to at other times in history, and it's our vocabulary, the way we interact with each other has been kind of degraded through time, and it's something that we need to pay attention to, something we need to pray about. So like this, it's so easy to put this on a card. In my Siddur, I make little envelopes on the inside and the back side, and I can stick note cards in there. It's a good place to do that, but this is something that like could be part of your prayers like all the time, and it really makes you reflect on the stuff you say. And we will probably at some point go through the Chaim's. The work is called Chaim, right? So I have that. We'll probably go through that someday and learn the laws of correct speech, and it will shut your mouth. Okay, well, thanks for watching.